Have you ever found yourself wanting to play a really old Windows game and not being able to get it to run? Well, on the Linux, there are several different ways to do this. For example, you can try using Wine, or maybe Play on Linux, or Bottles, or you might just want to install Windows 95 on your Linux computer. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do exactly this under DOSBox-X. And hopefully at the end of the video, we will get this really classic point-and-click adventure from Yahtzee to run. So here we are at the DOSBox-X homepage. And as you can see here, DOSBox-X is an open source DOS emulator for running DOS applications and games. What's interesting for this video is that you can also install Windows 95, 98 and so on DOSBox-X. So before we proceed with installing Windows, you have to install DOSBox-X. And I'm on Linux now, and I've installed it using Flatpak. But this should work just as fine on other operating systems. So let's head over to the wiki to see how we can install Windows on this. And down here under DOSBox-X guides and tips, there is a guide for installing Windows. And following this guide, we should be able to complete this, even though I had some issues, which I will talk about specifically when we get there. And of course, you need a Windows installation image. And that's out of scope for this guide and for this video as well. Then we have some general information about different versions of Windows. What I will install today is the last Windows 95 version, also known as 95C. And let's dive into this guide. And I will link to this guide in the video description as well. First, we have some general information about different releases which this guide applies to. And as I said before, this is the version I'm going for. And the first thing we need to do is to create a configuration file. I will do all of this on a USB stick since I want this to be a portable installation which I can use on different computers. So let's create this config file to start with. Here I am on the mounted USB stick in the command line. And let's create this config file that the guy told us to do. And we name it win95.conf, just like in the guide. And let's just copy paste this. And we can go with the standard settings more or less here. There's only one thing we need to change. As you see here, we need to change to 7.1 instead for the DOS version. Besides that, I'll just go with the standard configuration. Let's save. Going back to the guide. We have some more information about more advanced settings. I won't use any of those now. So let's continue by creating a hard disk image. And here you have some parameters to consider when determining the size of this hard disk image that we are to create. My USB stick is 2 gigs, And I'm going to use most of that space for this disk image, but I will also leave some space for other applications on it and files, so I won't go with the full 2 gigs. So now that it's time to create the hard disk image, we need to start DOSBox-X with our new configuration file, like this. And here we have it. And now we can proceed with creating the disk. And there's a separate wiki page about creating hard disk images. And I'll go with this template and just adjust the size. Image make hdd.img. Then we specify that it's a hard disk with a size. I'm going to make it 1.7 gigabytes. And finally, we'll go with FAT32. And there we have our image. Now that we've created the image, we can continue with the installation. And for that, we need our ISO file with Windows 95 on it. The first thing we do is to mount the hard disk that we created earlier. So let's do that. Now we have the C drive mounted, so we can go there and it's empty. And we see that it's 1.7 gigabytes roughly. Now we also need to mount our ISO image into the D drive. So let's do that. Now we have our D drive mounted. So let's have a look there. That looks fine. Now we need to copy the contents of the CD-ROM to our C drive. And for this we need Xcopy. In my case, Xcopy was not available. So it's not recognized by DOSBox-X, and I also didn't find it on this Windows 95 installation ISO. So for this I'm going to show you a workaround. We will use FreeDOS, which includes this Xcopy command. Let's download FreeDOS and we'll go with the live CD. So after that's been downloaded, we need to mount this live CD as well. So we proceed just like we did with the Windows 95 ISO. And I'll mount it to the E drive instead. Now it's mounted to the E drive. Let's go over there. And here we have in FreeDOS the xcopy.exe command. And now what we need to do is to copy the complete folder from D to C, just like this. We just copy this or type it in. X copy. And this will take a little while. And there it finished. So now if we go back to our C drive, we see that we have the Win95 folder here, and we can have a quick look in there as well. So it looks fine. Now we can start the installation process by running the setup command. And we're already in the correct location and C and the Win95 folder. So let's type in setup and continue. And now we have launched ScanDisk, checking our virtual C drive here. This will take a little while as well. And now the setup has started. So we continue. And then it's just to follow the setup wizard. And we'll go with the default installation folder. And just the typical installation. And now you need to enter your Windows 95 key. Then we can enter a name and a company. I would like to install a CD-ROM drive, but I'll leave the network adapter unchecked. We continue installing the most common components. And now the setup has finished and we just need to reboot. And now we're back in the DOSBox command prompt. So now we need to edit our configuration file that we created earlier by adding some more commands here. So let's copy this. Let's exit this one. And let's edit our config file. And let's have a quick look if this looks correct to us. It looks fine. I'm going to add keyboard layout settings as well for the DOSBox command. Let's save. And let's launch DOSBox-X again with this configuration file. We need to set our time zone. And I'm going to skip installing a printer. And we need to reboot again. And here we are, 30 years later, running Windows 95. So yes, let's just make a quick test and see if we can start some program here. Maybe we can just start Paint. And here we go. So now let's see if we can get this old game that I talked about in the beginning of the video to run. And in order to do that, I need to mount an additional disk where I have my game, because at the moment we can't access anything but what's on this local virtual hard drive. So we need to fix that. So I'm gonna shut down now. And then we'll continue by editing our configuration file. So what we need to do is to add an additional mount here. Let's add an E drive. And now, since we're only mounting a folder under my Linux system, we don't need to use the image mount command, but rather the mount command. Since it's not an image file, it's not an ISO file or something like that, just a regular folder. So mount E and then the path. So let's save that. And let's reboot again. Let's open the Windows Explorer to see if this worked. And here we see, for some reason, it's switched the D and the E drive. That doesn't really matter. So let's go and copy our game. And I'm going to put this in a new folder under C, Games. There we go. And now when we try to launch the game, we see that we're missing a DLL file. And I need to install some extra software in order to get this to work. So there are two extra applications or programs that we need to install, and it's DCOM95 and DirectX 7. So let's proceed with installing these. And we need to restart. And then DirectX 7. Okay. And I'm sure we need to restart again. Yes. Now let's give it a new try starting our game. Maybe we should run the setup as well. At least that seems to work. Let's launch the game. And that kind of works, but the colors look very distorted. So let's see if we can try and fix that as well. Let's have a look at the properties. And of course we can't close this window. Here we go. So we only have 256 colors. High color should be enough for most games this old. Another restart. Now the colors look normal again, so let's see how the game looks. Perfect, that looks quite right. That concludes this video. Now we'll learn how to set up Windows 95 on the DOSBox-X and how to get our really old game running. So thanks for watching and see you next time.